Hi everyone, and thank you for attending my virtual talk. I'm Norman, and I'm going to present our fMRI study on linking code complexity metrics to programmers' cognition. I will show you our experiment, and then why the usage of code complexity metrics may be misguided in practice and research, and then what's the possible way out of this dilemma. But let's back up for a second. Code complexity metrics are widely used in industry and research because of their promising claims. They take some piece of code, like this one, and measure static properties to supposedly quantify its complexity. For example, they might measure the textual size. One representative here would be lines of code. And the reasoning is, the more lines of code, that means higher complexity. A similar idea is vocabulary size. One common measure here is Halstead's measure, which is based on the number of defined variables. More variables means higher complexity. Another dimension is the control flow. The control flow measure, McCabe, is widely used in industry, and one representative for this category. Finally, an extension of control flow is data flow. For our experiment, we will use depth degree as a representative for this measure. Now, all of them rely on the same principle. The code complexity metrics measure some static property and then claims to predict how difficult it is going to be for a programmer to understand this piece of code. But is that really true? Some studies have correlated the complexity metrics and programmer behavior, so how fast and how correct they are, and they really questioned how accurate the metrics really are. In our experiment, we will take a closer look from multiple perspectives. So let's jump in. We've conducted a functional magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI experiment. So we stuck programmers into this big machine where they were trying to understand source code. And that allows us to objectively observe the inner working of the brain by measuring differences in blood oxygenation levels, the so-called BOLT response. So when the brain or the specific areas activate, we will see an increase in the BOLT response. And that reflects kind of the mental effort going into understanding a piece of code. Now, in general, the advantage of fMRI experiments is a more comprehensive view on the programmers. So we have multiple perspectives to the same cognitive process. So of course we have the behavioral data, how fast and how correct they are, but we can also measure the physiological data, so how the body responds to the task. We have visual attention through eye tracking, so we know when and where they focus their attention on. And finally, we have the brain activation and deactivation I already mentioned. Now, after the experiment was done, we asked participants for subjective view through an interview to get another perspective to code complexity. Now, in this talk, I'm going to focus on 3 topics here, on 3 perspectives, along with our 3 research questions. For our experiment design, we based it on previous fMRI experiments on programmers. That means we presented participants pieces of code with specific input and asked them to derive the output. We then had a rest condition, which allows the brain activation to return to baseline. And then we had a control condition. In the control condition, we also presented code, but participants did not have to comprehend it, they only searched for opening brackets. And this contrast between the control condition and the code comprehension condition allows us to filter from the entire brain to specific areas that really are the essence of program comprehension. So when this small subset of areas activates, that means those areas have an increase in BOLT response. In the paper, we go into more depth regarding the experiment design. But for now, one challenge for the experiment was to find specific snippets that vary along these 4 dimensions of code complexity. And that was actually quite difficult because they tend to go in the same direction. In the end, we measured 19 participants who comprehended 16 snippets each. The participants had an average of 7 years of programming experience, so we would classify them as intermediate programmers. Now let's take a look at the results. For research question 1, the behavior, we will look at correctness and response time. we use the Kendall-Tau correlation, and I will adhere to social science standards. So when I say small correlation, that means smaller than 0.3, and a medium correlation is between 0.3 and 0.5. So when we correlate the complexity metric values with the observed behavior, we see mostly small, some medium correlations, except for control flow, which essentially had no predictive power. This is in line with previous research that there's a little bit of truth behind complexity metrics, but it's not particularly close to actual behavior. For research question 2, the brain activation, we identified a network of brain areas that is activated during program convention. Now the network is in line with previous research. Again, more details about each area in the paper. But for now, let's look at the correlations. Here we correlated the activation strength for each area with the complexity metrics. And we see at best, again, medium correlations, but mostly small. So it seems that the complexity metrics do not have much predictive power on what's actually going inside a programmer's head. So it's really questionable if you can use them as a measure to difficulty of program comprehension. Now, last but not least is the research question 3, subjective view. And just to give you a sneak peek, here's the distribution of subjective relation. So each row is one snippet, and you can see that the distribution is not uniform. So even though we have a fairly homogeneous participant group, the individually perceived complexity is vastly different and very dependent on the individual. Back to our correlations. At this point, it's not surprising. We don't have strong correlations. In fact, it's mostly low. Now, some of you might say, oh, you only tested these 4 metrics. You didn't test my metric. My metric is so much better than all of these others. Well, we might have. We actually explored 37 additional metrics just to see if there are any of them that perform better on our data. But we didn't find any. Even advanced industry metrics like sonar cubes, cognitive complexity, has little predictive power. In conclusion, the answer to our overarching question, can code complexity metrics predict difficulty of program comprehension, is, well, at best to a limited degree. And this is across multiple perspectives to programmers' cognition. Now, my takeaway is that instead of trying to build one metric that does it all and encompasses all aspects of code complexity, we should use a combination of small metrics that target one dimension each. Another aspect is that we need to keep in mind that the perceived complexity and experienced difficulty seems to be very dependent on the individual programmer, even in a homogeneous sample. So one metric that claims to be valid for all programmers, from novice to expert, is really questionable. And that's how most metrics are currently set up. So where do we go from here? Well, it seems that measuring static code properties is not enough. We need to do a better job at linking metrics to human cognition. Now, in the paper, we outlined several options for this, including conceptual weaknesses from existing metrics. For example, control flow metrics often look for all possible execution paths, but we humans try to take mental shortcuts and really abort as soon as possible. We try to find the one way that solves our problem, whether that's driving output or finding the bug to solve the task at hand. We don't try to consider all paths at once, but that's how the metric sees it. We see our experiment as a starting point for future research that guides more cognition-driven metrics. So we have shown here how we can objectively and accurately measure the relationship between code complexity metrics and programmers' cognition. If you have interest or an idea for a specific measure, we provide replication package, data, and analysis scripts here on this page. So you can throw your metric at our snippets and see if it performs any better on our data. And please let us know if you have good or even bad results. With this, I would like to thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Bye-bye.
Hi again. Here we are with the second paper of the session, and Norman Pitek is with us, and he's going to answer all the questions you may have about his great paper, okay? The great research that he has presented in the video. So there are a couple of questions so far. Let's start with the first one. Lucas Armborst, sorry for not saying the names properly again. He says, if I remember correctly, Adet Salmo had brain activity in an fMRI some years ago, casting doubt on the reliability of fMRI measurements in general. Has this been solved? How reliable do you think your measurements are? Amazing.
Yeah, so that's a typical question that we always get. So the title of that paper, or was actually a poster, was like, hey, it's a dead Selma thing, and then you must do multiple correction or statistical test correction, because fMRI data is a lot of data. You have millions of data points, and what that showcased is if you don't correct for that, you just by chance will find something. So they didn't find activity in the brains; they just found noise, which eventually you will always find when you have millions of data points. And of course, if you do the proper statistics, you won't see anything. And that's what they showed always also in the paper, but that never was broadcasted in kind of the news and then was going around. So fMRI is very reliable, as seen by tens of thousands of studies every year in neuroscience.
Cool, interesting. Thank you very much. So Bruno da Silva has also, I think, a couple of questions. Thanks for the presentation. Have you discussed the code snippet size being a possible confounding factor? I know for fMRI studies, you couldn't have larger snippets since the study setting is highly limited by the fMRI complex setting, but code length is always an interesting metric affecting a bunch of things.
Yeah, so I mean, lines of code was actually one of the metrics we tested. But you are right that we are limited at the top up to like 30 lines per method. And I know there's the argumentation that you shouldn't merge in code where one method has more than 30 lines anyway. So we didn't check the kind of the extreme complexity of one metric. But it's definitely interesting to look into how do programmers perceive code where, like, let's say one method has more than 30 lines, has 50 lines, 60 lines. How does that change things? But we wanted to try to keep it in kind of the recommended thresholds of the typical methods. So if you go through like statistical or like the typical static analyzers, they usually have some upper thresholds of what one method should have. And we try to stay within that. But extreme values are definitely another topic that could be of interest, but a completely different question.
Okay, thank you very much for your answers. So far, for the moment, there are no more questions. But please, you can ask as many as you wish, because we still have 6.5 minutes for the... Okay, here, just one question just pop up. So Bruno da Silva is saying something else. So he has just written, complexity metrics effect may scale up to a significant point when analyzing larger pieces of code, in a real code review task, for instance.
Yeah, so we only looked at single methods. So we did not look at, let's say, relationships between multiple classes, multiple methods. When you, in a typical review, have to jump through, let's say, a whole architecture to understand the code. We only looked at the smallest component of code. Of course, what you're describing is very interesting as well. But as far as we know, that hasn't really been studied with fMRI before. And it's kind of a different question again, because it's more about navigating code and kind of understanding as a whole, instead of just looking at a single piece of code. And that was kind of our focus in this study.
Okay, thank you. There is a very interesting question from Alexander Serebrenik. I think Alexander and I have some kind of telepathy, because I was thinking about exactly the same thing. So, so Alexander's question could be considered also one question from me. So, to what extent are your results affected by the task? For example, cyclomatic complexity was originally designed as a testability metric, but it has been applied in the code comprehension task. Maybe cyclomatic complexity is not appropriate for code comprehension, but appropriate for testability or something else? What do you think?
Yes, definitely. I mean, depending on how you design the task, it might change how programmers think through the task. And of course, we had kind of the input-output behavior to make sure that we really think through the code. A different task, let's say bug finding, might have different results. But as far as I know, most of the complexity metrics don't claim they are, oh, this is only for testing. They say, oh, this predicts how difficult the code is, and not how difficult the code is in this specific scenario. So we do have to consider that a lot of the metrics try to be universal, while human cognition might be very individual, depending on the programmer themselves, but also then kind of in which mental state they are, how they currently deal with the code, if they're bug fixing, or let's say just trying to figure out what the code it does.
Okay, thank you very much for your answer. So for the moment, no more questions. I don't know if we will get some more. In the meanwhile, I have a curiosity. So I was wondering, this is related to the design you use for the experiment. If I remember properly from the video, when I saw it, the design was first using the treatment, then people rest, then they do the control, and then they rest. Is this correct?
Correct.
Okay, I was wondering, why did you decide to go for this specific sequence? And did you consider using alternative sequence, like, for example, first control, then rest, then treatment? Or why did you decide in the end even go only for just one and not to use multiple ones? So
we did repeat. So we did have 16 of the comprehension parts, and then there was, after the comprehension was a rest phase, and that's necessary for fMRI. So basically, when I give you the task, the brain activation response increases, and the rest condition allows it to go back to baseline. And then we have the control condition, and the control condition kind of gives us the contrast between the baseline and then what actually is activated. That allows us to identify which areas of the brain are really kind of the essence of performing comprehension. So it's more of a typical neuroscience design that we based our experiment on. So it was nothing that we came up with. It's just that's how neuroscience experiments work.
Okay, thank you very much. So we still have like 2 minutes to go, and there's so far one question, but yeah, I'm going to ask it, and even maybe we could even have time for one more. So if anyone can ask one more question, we will have time. So Carl Chapman is asking, given just the fMRI input and no additional context, could a neurobiologist differentiate between a confused programmer and someone pondering a shopping list?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's called reverse inference. Basically going from the brain activation back to some mental state, and that's actually not really possible. So even in an fMRI scanner, you cannot read people's mind. You can, if you collect a lot of data, do some kind of machine learning and kind of figure out the different pattern for an individual person. That is possible. But generally, no. It's not that you can just put anyone in there without prior knowledge and differentiate it. It's just not possible.
Okay. Yeah, really interesting question. We have almost a minute to go. There are no more questions. Yes, just one question pop up. So this must be quick answer, okay? Ari van Dersen is asking, just wanted to say that the data availability is, no, this is an announcement. Just after the conclusions is fully in line with ACM 6 soft open science principle. Well done. So this is just a congratulation. Gul Khaliki is asking, did you do expert evaluation for the code snippets to ensure that they are representative of code developers work on during their daily practices? And you have 20 seconds to answer.
Okay, no, we did not. Those were essentially selected for their representation in different metrics because the metrics tend to be in the same direction. And so we selected snippets that are very, very varied across metrics.
Okay.